Hello and welcome back to our channel. If you followed this channel for a while now, you'll hopefully have seen the series of videos we've done in recent weeks on the theme of how to invest so that crashes don't matter. And as a quick reminder, over the course of these several videos, we've looked at, firstly, the crucial importance of investing for the long run, and ideally the very long run, the merits of investing regularly each month and of automating your investments, the idea that you should completely ignore the news, and as part of that, stick to your guns when it comes to investment, a lot more on which in this video today, and how important it is to get your mix of investments roughly right based on your age. And to do that, we've looked at an elegant idea called 100 minus your age, which has been around for quite a few decades and can help you do that. We've also looked at the two key phases in your life as an investor. And as a reminder, these are accumulation, the period in which you will attempt to build wealth by saving and investing, ideally from, say, your 20s or 30s until your 50s or 60s, or younger if possible, and decumulation, which is sometimes called drawdown, and this is the period in your life when you'll want to live on the wealth you've built in the accumulation phase. So we might think about this as, say, roughly from the age of 60 onwards or younger, if you start early enough, can earn and invest a lot, or do a really good job, or are particularly lucky with your investment returns. And the holy grail of investment is to get to a point where you can afford to live on your money, or even better, the money you make from your money. Ultimately, this is the whole point of a pension, as we've covered before. And crucially, it's never been more important to get this stuff sorted than it is today, for all sorts of reasons we have also covered. A key focus then is on how you might do the best job you can with investment in both of these key investing phases of your life, in accumulation and decumulation. You want to make the highest investment returns you possibly can, but whilst also protecting yourself against the risk of suffering a large loss along the way. And as a reminder, a large loss will impact you differently depending on how old you are. Not losing money becomes increasingly important as we get older. This is because if you're 30, say, and you've built an investment pot of around £10,000, a 50% stock market or Bitcoin crash would reduce the value of that pot to around £5,000. This isn't great, but it's clearly a great deal less problematic and stressful than if you're 65 years old and the £1 million you might have spent a lifetime building falls to £500,000 with the same percentage fall. If you're 30 in this scenario, you've still got many years ahead of you to build your investment pot back up. But if you're 65, you do not have that time, and you'll more than likely need this money to fund you and your family in retirement. And this is why, for most people, the older you get, the more catastrophic a large loss is likely to be, and the more you do need to be thinking about the return of your money rather than the return on it. But there are two other reasons why avoiding making a large loss as you invest throughout your life is actually quite a lot more important, big picture, than many people realize overall. And in today's video, I wanted to focus on those two reasons because they're really important to understand if you're going to become an investor and do the best job you can. So these two reasons why a large loss is something you really need to try and avoid and how you go about doing that, those two reasons are, first, the crucial role played by human psychology, and secondly, something called the break-even fallacy. So let's have a look at each of them in turn. As I've written about a great deal over the years, we human beings are quite literally hardwired psychologically to be bad investors. The way our brains work hugely increases the likelihood that we will buy high and sell low. And this is something that it's really important to be aware of, if only to reduce the chance that you fall foul of your own imperfect psychology. When we see an asset going up and lots of people making money, there is a high chance we will rush to buy that asset given how strong our fear of missing out, or FOMO, is. And when we then see it plummet, there is an equally high chance we will rush to sell it as we panic. Sadly, this is guilt-edged human nature and something that's very well understood by psychologists. And it's this panic selling that is of most concern when it comes to your ability to make long-run stock market returns. Many higher risk assets will deliver high percentage returns in the long run, as we've covered in our previous videos. The problem is that they can be highly volatile in the course of that long run. And crucially, relatively few people have the mental fortitude and confidence to continue to own and continue to buy something that has fallen a long way. And this will happen with riskier assets at various points in time. As a quick aside, by the way, a really good book on this whole subject that I've mentioned before is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Do please check it out, and we'll include a link to it in the comments below. So the record of many decades of evidence is that investing in the stock market, so in shares or equities, will give you the best chance of making reasonably high real returns over time, and doing so can be life-changing. Set against this fact, stock markets have a habit of crashing every few years, and often by as much as 50% or even more. In the 2007 to 2009 global financial crisis, or GFC, for example, stock markets all over the world plunged. And arguably the world's most important index that we've looked at before, the S&P 500, fell from around 1,500 in October 2007 to the very spooky and biblical low of 666 by March 2009. That is a fall of around 56%. The UK stock market fell by even more than that, as did pretty much every other stock market in the world to a greater or lesser extent. Proper ouch all round. Each of these markets had already done a very similar thing a few years earlier in the dot-com sell-off of 2000 to 2002. And crucially, when this happens, all over the world, journalists churn out the usual hyperbole about how dangerous stock market investment is, and people react as they so often do when there is a stock market crash. They pull money out of the stock market in a panic, and worst of all too often give up on investment altogether. By doing this, they turn a theoretical loss into a real one. And this is why we've also covered the critical importance of ignoring the news, investing regularly each month, and sticking to your guns and your plan over many years. Because, at the time of scripting this video, the S&P has just gone through 6,000. This means that it is now up about 800% from that 2009 low of 666. The last time lots of people panicked, sold out of the market, and in all too many cases, gave up on investment altogether. And those people who did that, so gave up on stock market investment because the market crashed, have quite obviously, self-evidently, potentially missed out in a big life-changing way, given the 800% move in the time since. Sad though this is, many people find it almost impossible psychologically to sit on a paper loss of any magnitude and ride it out, confident that things will get better in the longer term. And this is why stock market crashes can be so corrosive and why many people are scared of the whole idea of investment generally. It seems too frightening, risky and capricious an activity, but it really need not be for all of the reasons we're covering in this series of videos. Financial products are one of the few things that people tend to buy more of when they're expensive and sell when they're cheap, for these reasons of deep-seated human psychology. And it's for this reason that most people's investment returns are generally a long way lower than the returns of the stock market as a whole. And that is for the people who are actually investing. Even worse, most people don't invest in the stock market at all, so have no chance of benefiting from these sorts of returns, and this is one of the main reasons that so many people struggle financially, and also a big part of why the UK is in such a pickle economically, by the way. This is a big part of why I'm taking the time to make these videos, because you can avoid all these problems if you really understand what you're doing. So the fact that our brain can lead us to buy high and sell low, and also very possibly give up on investment entirely, is bad enough. But there's a second consideration I wanted to look at in this video today that means that the impact of risk and volatility on your real life ability to make money can actually be even worse. And this is something called the break-even fallacy, which all too few people understand, at least in my experience. The break-even fallacy is just about how the maths work at the most fundamental level when it comes to calculating percentage returns. It is the arithmetic fact that a higher percentage return is required to get back from a price level to break even, or square one, where you started, than was suffered when an asset originally fell to that price level. So I appreciate that probably sounds a bit complicated, and hopefully this table we're showing will help explain things. So as you can hopefully see from the table, what this means is that if something you own falls 50%, you will actually then need it to go up 100% to get back to where you started, not 50%. And as I say, this phenomenon, the phenomenon shown in this table, is often very poorly understood. Many people naturally assume that if you lose 50% of your money, for example, you'll then need to gain 50% to get back to square one. But this is incorrect because of the maths. If you're down 50%, you'll need to make fully 100% to recover that loss. If you're down 25%, you'll need to make 33%. If you suffer a 90% fall, you'll need that thing to go back up 900%. And if you endure a 95% fall, you'd need to be lucky enough to see no less than a 1900% recovery, as so many people have experienced in the crypto world in various altcoins in recent years. It's extremely important to understand this. If you have, say, £10,000 in a high-risk asset such as Bitcoin, or, say, £100,000 in shares in your pension or other investment accounts, and you're unlucky enough to see a 50% fall in the value of your position, as people so often do in crashes, you will end up with £5,000 or £50,000 respectively. Crucially, to then get back to your original £10,000 or £100,000, you will need to make a 100% return on your money, not a 50% return. And this is why Warren Buffett, arguably the world's greatest living investor, has said about investment, rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. And also, most importantly, why it's so important to understand all of this stuff and how to deal with it before you invest. These big crashes and volatility in stock markets or other financial assets generally need not matter if you have a plan, invest for the very long run, invest regularly each month over many years, and avoid panicking through market crashes, as we've covered in detail in these last few weeks and months. So please do check out the full video series here to really help you get to grips with how all this stuff works. So that's it for today. In our next video, we're going to look at an idea called sequence risk that's related to this discussion, and that I would argue is one of the key risks in investment which almost no one understands, including a huge chunk of the investment industry, by the way. As ever, if you want to ensure that you're one of the first to see our next few videos when they're published, please do click the subscribe and bell buttons. And if you'd like to hear more from me generally, please do feel free to connect with me on any of LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter or X. You can also subscribe to our free email service from the Plain English Finance website. So until next time, I wish you the very best for your money and for everything else more generally.